Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of my new series, Living Transmissions. So grateful to have you tune in with me today and have this opportunity to share the living transmissions that are my life, with the intention of inspiring and delighting you to know that the same synchronicities, magic and miracles that I experience in my life are also available for you. So I'm super stoked to be bringing this here to you today. For those who don't know me, my name is Maria. I am the Chief Energy Operator of Transformational Shifts. I've been a global nomad for over 20 years. And like I said, I'm here to inspire and delight with the magic that unfolds when you intentionally live and surrender in trust to the flow of life. Back in 2010, I made the bold decision to quit my job, buy a motorhome, and travel across the United States thinking I'd find a new place to live. And it wasn't shortly after that I realized, wow, this is amazing. Why would I ever want to settle down somewhere when I could live everywhere? And so that is exactly what I have been doing for the last 16 years, traveling full time and still flowing with ways the universe wants to show me to go. So in 2022, that was my first initiatic trip to Egypt, and since then my life has truly never been the same. I traveled to a lot of ancient sites these days. Light language has opened up for me massively since all of that began. And in 2024, I was guided to go to Mount Shasta to drink the water to unlock the information. And since then, I have been collecting water and sharing water with the land and with the waters of everywhere that I travel. And it's really been a beautiful, incredible opportunity for me to connect more deeply with myself, with Mama Gaia, and with the natural intelligence that we have available to us at all times. In Egypt in 2025, I had the opportunity to have my first in-person activation with Matthias Di Stefano, and I have been traveling with him a lot since then. So a lot of the short stories that I share today are going to talk a little bit about that. And more specifically today, I want to share the story of how two sacred messengers showed up to share the story of the hero twins, which is a mythical Mayan story that had my mind blown at the parallels that I could draw from my own life. So that's kind of going to be the context of the call today, and we're going to walk through the houses that the twins walk through and have some fun as we go. So before we get started, I just want to take a moment to drop into this present moment. Wherever you're tuning in from, I'm grateful for you being here with us today. And I'd love to share a light language transmission to just really kick off this series and pull in my vibration from my heart to yours on what I wish to share with you today. So I'm just going to take a moment to allow the breath to come in and the exhale coming out. Perhaps you want to breathe with me as we inhale in, maybe allowing some sound on the exhale. One more time, breathing in. We are so pleased to be with you here today. Indeed, we are the ones, the ones that Maria calls her guides. Akinya mokushti nyakantarati. Unya makashi nyakantara. If you're new to light language, know this is a vibrational transmission. Ayanokushti kiamakati. Intended to speak to your body and soul. Ukunya makashi nyaka. Do not try to figure this out with the mind. Ayanaku shuku nyaka. If you can, allow yourself to simply receive. Ayanakunya makashi anakuna katinya kasha. Anyamokuna kantinya kushia. Aynakantara nuya makashikia makara nukuya. Anakashi anakara moku asha arankuntiki nyamaka. Ai nakasha kontara niamokunia kanti niakashi niamokunia kanti kia. Ai nakara ra 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 ra. Ashunya makantaranya. Ai kia mokushti kia naka atara tukushia maka. Ai nakashi a naku ataranya. Ai nakushi amantiki ara unya makati a ra 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 ra. Hai nakashukunti kia makashi. Anyaku nyakashi nyaka. Anyaku nyakati kia mokoshi kia nakatara o nyamakashukunti kia. Shoo 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 shoo. Ukarantash kuntaran kaum kunti karashkia. Ai karumukunti kia mukuntara ashukuntara anyaku. Akaranukunti kia makashkunti kia maka. The invitation is to, if you can, think of an intention that you have for your day, for your week, for your month, whatever's feeling alive for you that wishes to have more intentionality brought into the life. Akarunkuntika aunkuntarashkuntikia makaara atukuntikia. One of the things that I have learned throughout my journeys is the importance of bringing intentionality in with everything that I do. And the importance of including with grace and ease in that intention. As we know, the words that we speak hold great power. Some may even think of abracadabra. I create as I speak. So with this invitation now to bring that intention into your heart, as we connect with my dragon light language, grateful for Prisma joining us here today. Indeed, the dragons are here to support us in our creations as they breathe fire into that life. Humpui, humpui, aho, and so it is. Ashiki yamaku anti ara tuku yamaka. Gracias, gracias, gracias for allowing me that moment of transmission here. And so as you come back into this space, I'm going to invite you to feel into your body what perhaps feels alive from that transmission, what feels alive as you centered in on your intention, what feels alive in the mind, what is the mind saying? These are all practices that I have been incorporating in my life very strongly for the last 6 years. And I would say even more strongly since that first time I went to Egypt, especially when I have the opportunity to sit in ceremony with our indigenous brothers and sisters who are so beautifully connected to ritual, to devotion, and to ceremony as a way to create a catalyst in your life. So whether it's for a clearing or something you're calling in, or both, because as we know, when we clear, we make space for the new. Know that when you speak these intentions out loud, the universe listens. So I'll invite you after this call today, if it feels good, to speak those intentions out loud or to journal about them, really solidifying what it is that you're calling in and claim it for you, knowing that in the claiming, it is already yours. So let's get into it, shall we? I've been dropping a lot of teasers already about the scorpion twins that arrived in my room. So for those who aren't in my Signal community, which I would love for you to join, I will drop information below on how to subscribe. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, please go ahead and do that now. And I have been having a lot of fun here in Lake Atelan in ways that I didn't expect. I've definitely been connecting a lot more with nature, and the birds are so alive since I've been here. You may hear them a little bit in the background. And so to have scorpions arrive in the room was no surprise. In fact, the Airbnb that I'm staying at, which is a magnificent story all in its own that will have to be saved for another day, which will be told, by the way. It gave me a little heads up that I might see a scorpion in my room. And it turned out this wasn't the first two scorpions to arrive in my room. It was actually the third and fourth scorpions to arrive in my room. The first one caught me by surprise under my bath mat towel. Fortunately, I was able to safely escort it out back into nature. The second one, unfortunately, didn't have such a fate. I don't know how it happened, but it was already transitioned by the time I found it. And so the night that the next two showed up, I remember after seeing the first one, grabbing the glass. This is how I do for any insect that I wish to relocate back into its natural habitat. I put a glass over it, and then I slide something underneath it to take it outside. And in this particular Airbnb, I have two glasses, one that I was using for water. And I really remember I had the thought when I saw this first scorpion, what if there's a second one? What will I do? I only have one glass. And sure enough, not like 45 seconds later, the second one shows up. To which, of course, I just dump the water out. It's a very easy decision when you have a scorpion running around your room, what you're going to do in that situation. But it was a really funny indicator to me how many times in my life I have had premonitions about the future. Granted, it was only 45 seconds into the future, but nonetheless, these are signals that we want to pay attention to. And this is one of the things that I would love to emphasize throughout this series of living transmissions. Actually, I have a little photo because I know y'all like to have a little visual representation. So here are the hero twins that arrived in my room. And, as any good little tech nomad that wants to go deeper in what does this mean, I jump on AI to find out what are some of the indigenous symbolisms of the scorpion. And so I was receiving different messages around transformation. We know the venom of the scorpion is very powerful. There's certain ceremonial cultures where they're actually purposefully utilizing the venom of the scorpion as a way to heal and clear. And so I'm reading through various definitions and I'm thinking, no, none of these are the message that the scorpion twins have to send me. And so I say, well, what about Mayan cosmology? Because here at Lake Atelan, this is known as the land of the Mayans. And that's when the message was revealed of the hero twins story. Now, this is quite a long story, so I'm going to do my best to summarize it in a way that still honors the tradition. And one thing to note about anything with Mayan cosmology, when the Spanish conquistadors came over to this region, the Mayans were an incredibly advanced civilization. They were way more advanced than Europeans in mathematics, in science, in language. They used incredibly detailed hieroglyphics and language to communicate, to share wisdom, and to share stories. And oftentimes, the way that they shared their stories, their wisdom was through stories. And so when the Spanish came here, as to not feel inferior, they decided to burn nearly all of the texts that the Mayan had. So a lot of these stories had to be passed down orally. And not only that, they had to be shared kind of on the down low, because if they were to be discovered, they could be persecuted or worse. So the story that AI was giving me at first, I had to pause because I thought, I don't want AI to fully tell me this story. I'd like to read more of a source reference on this. Come to find out, this is the only way we have it documented, because there are certain individuals throughout the last few hundred years who spent a good number of years really working with the tribes, learning the language, gaining their trust, so that they may honor their tradition and preserve the cultural history that still exists to this day. So all of that to say, there's many renditions of this story. And I reached out to my dear friend and mentor, Taruka Larama. He was one of the individuals featured in our intro video. He's one of the most incredible souls I have met in terms of the wisdom that he has. He is absolutely a wisdom keeper. And so he shared a document with me that had one of these versions of the hero twin story. So the story goes like this. There was a father and an uncle who were master ball players. They would play all day and all night on this ball court that just happened to be right above Xibalba, which is known as the underworld here in Central and South America. Many indigenous tribes know and refer to the underworld as this. And so the lords of the underworld became very annoyed and disturbed by all of the ruckus that the father and the uncle were making as they were playing their ball game. They were known as the greatest ball players to ever live. So the lords decided they were going to invite these two down to the underworld and challenge them to a game. Unbeknownst to the uncle and the father, this challenge was really a setup for them to fail so that they could then be sacrificed. So then the lords no longer needed to be disturbed by their activities. And this is where I'm truncating the story a lot. It's very illustrative. If anyone wants to know and read the full story, you're welcome to message me. I would be happy to share this with you. It's like a, 300 and some page PDF document that I have. So it's very illustrative. And so they go down to play the game. They're tricked. They end up having to sacrifice their lives because they were not able to win the game. And one of the father's head was chopped off and then placed in a calabaza tree. And then his head grew into, this is like a fruit that's down here. And so the daughter of one of the lords of the underworld goes to visit the tree. And she speaks with the father, who then ends up speaking. And as he's speaking, the seeds of life go from his head into her womb. And she becomes magically pregnant with twin baby boys. Now, this disrupts the Lord Father very much because she's not married, she's not in relationships, so he ends up banishing her to go to the upper world to live. She can no longer be in the underworld. And so when she arrives, she has nowhere to go. She knows no one. She's never lived in the upper world. And so she goes to the grandmother's house of the uncle and father to tell her that she was pregnant with twins from this woman's son. Now, long story short, again, she had to prove that she was telling the truth because obviously this story was very unbelievable. Again, it's all myth, right? But there's so many nuances to the story that really layer it in a rich way. So I'm going to fast forward again. She gains the grandmother's trust. She has the twins. And the twins also have the uncle's sons living in the same house who do not like these little baby boys. They have all the attention, and so they're doing everything they can to kind of torment them. Like they would tickle them, they would prick them, they would make them cry all the time. And so these babies, really had a hard upbringing. And eventually the grandmother loses it. She's like, I can't take it anymore. All these babies do is cry. Get rid of them. And so she convinces the little boys to go then take these babies somewhere so that they're no longer in the home. And I'm going to truncate it again because, again, there's just so many layers to this. The babies end up surviving in nature because they are magical beings, and nature ends up taking care of them, raising them, and then one day they return back to the grandmother's house. And to the dismay of the two other boys that they were still alive, end up having a little bit of competition at this point again. And, the cousins really represent what happens when you allow jealousy to take over. They were very talented. They were artists. They were very excellent at farming. They had, really amazing gifts, but they basically kind of let them go to waste by allowing the jealousy and resentment to really take hold. And so one day the boys go hunting, and they end up convincing the cousins to climb up in the tree to catch the birds that they had shot with their blowguns. And then they turned them into monkeys. So kind of a little funny side story to that. Fast forward again. The boys end up discovering the uncle and father's ball-playing equipment one day in the shed, which the grandmother had hid because she couldn't stand to lose any more of her family, and she didn't want anyone to have access to this ball-playing equipment. So the boys end up practicing, and again, on the same court, start causing a ruckus. Okay? And so the lords then are disturbed again. And by this time, the little boys had learned about the story of their father and uncle and the fate that they had received. And these two little boys were very intelligent. They were very spiritually connected. They communicated with nature. That's how they were able to survive as babies. And so they knew when the invitation to come to the underworld would present itself that they had to be really cunning. And so sure enough, one day the Lord summoned them to the underworld, thinking they're going to do the same fate as the father and the uncle, but not expecting how incredible these two young boys were. And so this is where the parallel of my life comes in. Because through the series of them being invited to the underworld, they would have to play the ball game, and then they would at night spend the night in a house that had a different challenge or theme. And so the very first night was the House of Darkness. So the challenge was they were given a cigar, and they were told they couldn't light the cigar. And the challenge of being in the dark was, that the fear of the dark would overcome you, and you would end up lighting, something so that you would have light. And so they ended up fashioning from some red macaw feathers and a lightning bug that they had summoned to make it look like they had lit the cigar, but in all actuality they hadn't. And so in the morning, when the servants come to get the boys, thinking that no doubt they'd failed this challenge, they come to find out that the cigar was not lit. So House 1 of Darkness, check mark, achieved. So night 2, they go into the House of Cold. So this House of Cold, it was covered in ice, you had frost walls, and they ended up bringing a pack with them full of different supplies. They were known for collecting things because one day, you never know, you might need it. So they had these magical hot, cold blankets that they were able to apply the hot side to the walls and the floor to melt the ice so it wasn't so cold, and they wrapped themselves in it to sleep for the night. So again, the next morning, the servants come expecting to find the boys frozen on the floor, and they're just sitting there smiling, like welcoming, greeting the day, like, when's breakfast? So then the third house is the House of Knives. And this is where the story changes a little bit. So AI gave it to me originally in this order, and then the story that I received from Taruka Larama had the House of Knives as the second house. In any case, there's still parallels to my life that are funny, which we'll get into here in a minute. So in the House of Knives, there are floating daggers that are triggered by any movement that you make. So there's no way to actually exist or be in the house without moving, without these daggers attacking you. One of the brothers, named Hunapu, spoke to these daggers as the god of obsidian, Tahil. And he told them that he was there to speak with the knives. They were no longer meant to cut human flesh. They were only meant to cut animal flesh at this point. And the way that Hunapu had presented it is that the Lord had sent him to deliver this message. And so the knives agreed because he had spoke to them very calmly, very softly, and they believed his authority. And so that night, the other challenge was that they were to fill all of these bowls full of flower petals. And so they summoned the cutting ants to come and support them with this. And in the morning, when the servants arrived, the bowls were filled with the flower petals, ready to present to the lords. Now, this angered the lords greatly. I mean, by this point, they had basically sidestepped the challenges they thought for sure they'd already succumbed to. And they figured there's no possible way they could do this challenge, so this really kind of blew them away. And so then on to the fourth house, the House of Fire. In the House of Fire, there's flames everywhere. Turns out the boys still had their blankets, so instead they flipped them to the cold side out. They used it to distinguish the fire. Same tool, new application. You don't always need something new in order to make it through. And they were able to repurpose and make it through that night. So this is where I had stopped reading the story when AI was showing me all of this, because my mind was so blown. I was thinking, how could this possibly be paralleling my life? So to kind of back it up, in November, I left the United States to come travel down in South America. And in December, I went to Colombia for a 5-night dark retreat. And this is the first time I'd ever done a dark retreat. And my whole intention in going into the dark retreat was to go in the dark so that I may see the light, what wants to come to the light. And you know, there's a lot of different ways that someone can experience a dark retreat. When you spend an extended period of time, usually over 72 hours or more, in complete pitch darkness, no light, nothing at all, your brain starts to release DMT, which happens every night when we sleep, and also in excess when we're born and when we die or transition, birth to birth. So for me, the DMT experience is like a portal molecule. There are also many plant medicines and animal medicines that we access that are now created also into synthetic medicines that can also support this experience. And so for me, I was actually quite surprised how comfortable I felt in the dark. I honestly felt like I might have done this before. Like I might have been blind in another lifetime. I actually really loved it. I remember thinking on day 3, like, oh, I don't want to leave. This feels too short. I was wanting to experience more. Profound activations can oftentimes happen for people going through this experience. And I ended up having a profound experience. And of course, it's not exactly in the way that you imagine it might be when you are told and set out on these types of journeys. And it turns out the first night I had a very severe, violent dream that is not characteristic of me. Like typically don't have dreams about violence at all. And so this really caught me off guard. And in the dream, I had woken up in the dark retreat and the lights were on. And so there was confusion because I know the lights aren't supposed to be on. That ruins the whole experience. And so I go to the retreat leader and I'm like, what's going on? And he says, well, Miguel, who's in the retreat with me, he was raped last night. And so he's left and the other woman is left. If you want, you can stay or you can go. And I'm thinking, well, where's the rapist? And he said, well, he's still on the property. So next thing I know, I'm going to grab a golf club and I'm beating this man. And I end up taking the golf club and hitting his right eyeball out of the socket. And that's when I woke up from my dream and I'm like, holy cow. And I asked the retreat facilitator, is it common to have intense dreams while you're here? And he said, yeah, actually, it's why we have dragon statues all over the property, because dragons are, the watchers of the dreams. They're kind of like the guardian, the protectors of the dream world. So I thought, okay, doing my best to not allow these thoughts to consume my mind, because, another aspect to the dark retreat is you're also in silence. And, any time that you're spending an extended amount of time in silence, your thoughts can end up getting really loud. And so that night, that second night, I had brought my Isis deck in with me. I thought, I'm just going to draw a card, and when I get out of the retreat, I'll see what it was, see what message it wanted to have for me. And the third night, morning, I should say, the retreat facilitator was waking us up. I want to say maybe 3, 4 in the morning. I'm not exactly sure. You don't really have concept of time when you're in there. So that he could do a sound activation with us to really kind of bring us deeper, and also some breath work to really activate that DMT and stimulate the pineal gland. And so that morning, he, just like he always did, he rang the bell. So we're supposed to get up, go to the bathroom, and really we're meant to come straight there because he really wanted to capture that liminal space between I just woke up and now I'm really waking up, because our brain waves are at a different state at that point. And so by the time I had made it to the room we were supposed to be in for this, he had closed the door and started. They were already talking. And this really triggered me. I thought, why would he close the door? He knew I was coming. He could hear me. It's a small space. He also had mentioned at one point that he knows where we're at any given time in there, which signaled to me that he has, we'll call it extra perceptory senses. And so I get in there, and this was the one morning that he was asking us to share, a little bit about where we were at with our experience. And by the time it got to me to share, I was so triggered and angry, especially because the other people in the retreat were speaking Spanish and there was no attempt to translate. The part of me that felt left out was really triggered. And so I said, I didn't feel like sharing because that was the best words that I could get out, that we're not going to be angry. And so we went into the meditation and I did a soul integration with myself. And this is something that I do within my own self practice and with my client practice that I have. Sometimes people will refer to it as parts work, or in psychology, they call it internal family systems, connecting with your inner child. So really allowing myself to go deeper and drop in with the part of me that was feeling triggered about this. And I told her, there's no possible way that people can close doors on us because we are here to open doors. And that kind of intrigued her, and she felt good about that. And I said, you don't need to worry about this. I know that you are angry and it's not fair that this had happened, but I'm going to say something and I'll take care of it. And oftentimes when we're feeling triggered and we're going through this process, this is a really important step with connecting with whatever part is feeling triggered, because whatever that moment that originally happened, or in many cases happens many times in the life, we develop a strategy at that time to support us in that moment. And at the time, that's the best we could do. It's all we would know. So oftentimes it could be shutting down, or maybe it's lashing out. Whatever it is, that strategy was there to serve us. But over time, the strategies we had as like a 5, 7, 12-year-old, they're not going to serve us as adults anymore. And it's really important that we relieve them of that burden, of that responsibility that they feel. And IFS will often talk about this in terms of our protectors that come online. There's parts of us that will come on to manage or put out the fires so that the more vulnerable parts of us don't get exposed. And the more that you connect with yourself and the deeper you go, you're able to work with the protectors so that you can then work with the more vulnerable parts. So at this point, I've done this so much, I was already working with the most vulnerable part. She didn't want to feel left out. There's many times when I was young, someone that had to switch schools in 3rd grade, it was hard to be the new kid and feel like you could fit in or connect with people in the way that you really wanted to. You just want to have fun. You're in 3rd grade. Come on. And so I end up saying something to the retreat facilitator that I was feeling really upset that the door had been closed and there was no attempt to, translate. So I had no idea what was going on. And he lost it. Like, he blew up and it shocked me so much that I was thinking, whoa, like I was the one that was supposed to be mad here and now you're angry. So that actually calmed me down instantly. And I was like, can we just calmly talk about this? And granted, remind you, all of this is in the dark. So I don't necessarily see him, but it turns out he can see me because he can see energy. And he can't see like the details of my body, but what he said is he can see, the aura, we'll say. He sees colors of emotion or of energy. And so we end up talking about it and having, coming to terms with the situation. But the whole rest of the day, my mind is looping. When you get triggered like this, at least for me, oftentimes I find my mind wants to loop to justify how I was right. And so this is all a part of the journey, right? This is all a part of exposing what it is that the mental patterns are that want to be seen so that we can ascend and elevate past this. So we're not stuck in these old mental patterns that have kept us in places we don't want to be. And so day 4, day 5, it was brilliant. It was beautiful. By the time it got to night 4, I thought, this has been really great. As much as I did want to stay longer, I was like, I think this is good for my first round. And it turns out, as a part of really observing my thoughts, one of the things that really amused me is how often my thoughts are songs. Like, someone could just say a word and it'll trigger a song in my head automatically. And so a lot of time it was me singing in my head to myself. And, everyone's had the experience of when you get a song caught in your head. That definitely was part of my dark retreat experience quite a bit. And so at the end of the retreat, I thought, I'd really love to sit down and speak with him some more. I was planning to stay at the facility for 4 more days to really integrate my experience. And I ended up coming out of the dark. It's a beautiful experience when you first get to see light again. He had led us to this incredible garden. The property is just absolutely amazing that this retreat was at. And so, you're like looking at a leaf like you've never looked at a leaf before. Or you're looking at a flower, and he had peacocks on the property, okay? And one of the peacocks' names was Thoth, okay? There was a lot of Egyptian energy in this property. His parents are the ones that had built this facility in Colombia in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And this is way ahead of, the times. It's now becoming more of a trend to go to dark retreats, but to have a dark retreat facility, dedicated dark retreat facility in Colombia at that time, it's just like, what's going on here? Well, it turns out his stepfather was really prolific in studying sacred geometry and the ancient mysteries of Egypt. And so part of the ancient mystery schools has always included a dark retreat aspect. Even Jesus on his missions and while he is learning would go into a cave of darkness, which ultimately was preparing him for the tomb. But also there's so much that we can confront when we deprive a sense like sight, which is so crucial to how we live. And a lot of things can get heightened. And so I'm laying there and I take my blindfold off and I'm adjusting. I mean, it's hard to see at first because the light is so bright, even though it was right at dawn. And as soon as my eyes start to focus, I see Toth, the peacock, up in the tree right above me, which was so amazing. And so it turns out that this entire experience, I had known about the trip that Matthias was planning to Egypt before going into this dark retreat, but I'd really wanted to get back to Peru at this point. It was really a whole point of me going back down to South America, but something was really calling me to do this dark retreat first, and timing ended up working out perfectly for me like it always does. I'd reached out and he said, well, yeah, actually we have a dark retreat happening in 3 weeks. And I was like, I'm there. So I'm walking back to my room and I'm really feeling like I think I'm meant to go to Egypt with Matthias. Like I had said earlier in the call, I had gone to Egypt in 2025 with a trip that Matthias was supposed to be on, and some things had happened, and it turned out he could only come for that one day of that activation that we did. And so I thought, well, I don't know. I text my dear soul sister who was with me in Egypt the year before, and I said, I think I'm meant to go to Egypt with Matthias in February, which is just 2 months away. And as soon as I hit send, I walked through a spider web. And for those of you who are familiar with the work of Matthias Di Stefano, you may recall that one of the guides that he, or his higher self that he channels, he calls the Weaver. And so I thought, well, that's a funny, obvious, couldn't be any more obvious than a spider web smacking you right in the face. So then I texted my friend Noelani, who also knows. I said, okay, I just walked through a spider web. I'm pretty sure that means I'm meant to go. And as soon as I hit send, I kid you not, I walked through another spider web. And I could just hear the universe laughing at me, and my guides are like, say maybe one more time. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to Egypt. So within an hour I had booked all the things. So there's no second guessing in my world. When things are this obvious and they're this clear, I act on it. And I have built a life where I am flexible enough in order to honor that and allow that to happen for me. So so next thing I know, I'm in my room with the card that I had drawn in the dark. And I kid you not, I wish I had brought the card with me to this call. The card was the Brother in Darkness. And it was all about the rising of the divine feminine against the darkness of the brotherhood that's been taken over for the past however many years. And remind you that this is all connected to the first dream that I had, and the realization that, there was some psychic integrity that I think could have been strengthened in this container, because there was no permission asked for consent to be able to remotely be viewing in on us in this experience. And that's what my dream was revealing. And so I share all this. It's been many, many months, and I've been hesitant to share the story of my dark retreat because, one, I think I was still integrating it all. And two, I really wasn't wanting to center my experience around this trigger, but the reality was that was my experience, and it doesn't necessarily have to center on that as much as what came to light. And again, remember, that was my whole intention going into the retreat, was whatever was meant to come to the light to come forth. And so anytime I have an opportunity to work with the trigger and go deeper with myself, I'm 100% there for myself, because I know how important it is for me to go through that process so that I can build greater trust with my parts and within myself to do the things that I want to do in life. Like snap book a trip to Egypt, as one does. So, back to the hero twin story and why we're here with the Scorpions. The House of Knives is what's next. And so for those of you who hadn't caught my Egypt recap, for those of you that have so graciously donated to witness me here today in my opening transmission, the replay link will be sent to you, and eventually one day this video will also make its way to YouTube, and I'll share the link down below for that as well. So I'm not going to get into the whole Egypt trip, but needless to say, anytime you have an opportunity to go to Egypt with Matthias Di Stefano, I absolutely recommend it. It's not a tour. Don't imagine that you're going to go around learning all these, details that they want to teach you from Egypt about the spaces, which is a whole other story. We go there and we're doing energetic activations. I don't want to call it work because it's not a word that I really love to subscribe to, but it's powerful. And the magic that can happen when you play in this way and really tune in and again are intentional. And he has an entire series that he's bringing us through for the next 3 years on the alchemical journey. So that was the whole theme of this trip, Nigredo, going into the void, going into the darkness, again, so we can see the light. And so for me, the dark retreat was kind of a preface of this. And it was also something that people that I really admire and consider mentors to me were really saying. Pam Gregory, who's one of my favorite astrologers, was really encouraging us in December to go within, to tune out of the noise, to really center into ourselves. Kelly Kolodny was saying the exact same things. Not to mention, in January, we were traveling through the Death Code, Light Code activation with Kelly Kolodny. So I'm like all in the darkness and the death and the depths of the Chibalba with this whole theme. And so what was really speaking to me when I read about the House of Knives was this opportunity to speak with what causes the wounds, which are the knives. That's how they got through that challenge. It's not by avoiding, I don't want this to cut me. It's going towards it and saying, let's work this out. And so for me, the House of Knives was definitely the chapter for me in from the dark retreat into Egypt, and then bringing us to the House of Cold. So after Egypt, I fly back to Peru, back to the Sacred Valley. This is my second time that I've been to the Sacred Valley. And for those who aren't familiar, Cusco and the Sacred Valley, it's very high in elevation, so it is cold. And I did end up joining Matthias on the Peru trip. I'm not going to have time to go into all of that today because this is just too big of a story, but perhaps one day if there's enough interest. And also I think I need more integration time from that trip. I'll share a couple highlights, but the real pinnacle for me in terms of the House of Cold with Peru was my initiatic journey to Apu Asangate. And Apu Asangate is the tallest peak. Apu stands for mountain in Quechua. And it is just so potent and so powerful. For those who are familiar with Mount Shasta or have been there, and know the potency of that, this is no different. And for me, I was connecting in ceremonies in Peru with Mount Shasta, with Apu Asangate, and with Mount Kalash, which I was connecting with Kelly Kolodny through the Death Code, with Matthias while we were in Egypt. And then, again, also in Peru. And this kind of like sacred geometry came through for me in one of my activations, where it felt like I was connecting each of the 3 peaks with the center of the earth. And I think there's more for me to connect with Mount Kalash. I know it's calling me. At one point in my journey, I will make it there. But in this particular journey to Apuasangate, we had the opportunity to go with incredible Kiro shaman and some of my dear girlfriends that had invited me to join them, so we could sit in ceremony. And when you sit in ceremony with the Kiros, oftentimes that'll include what's called a despacho. And towards the end of the intro video, you might have noticed I was sitting in front of him, and he was folding a piece of paper. That was a different ceremony I was in, but it's the same process. They have all of these different items that they will put into the despacho, and each item has some sort of symbolism, some sort of meaning. Flower petals, calling in the directions, calling in the ancestors, something like seeds or corn. They have little like sugar figures that they put in there. They'll add gold leaf, they'll add silver, just basically whatever the Kiro, the shaman, is guided to add. And everything is with intention, everything is with prayer. And as you're building the despacho, you're focusing on your intentions, you're focusing on what you want to call in. And then you wrap this piece of paper up, and then you put it in the fire to send the prayers to the ancestors. And also as a form of release as well. And so as a part of all of this ceremony, at one point, we were guided to go into the river and do a cold plunge for a clearing and a blessing. And, Apuasangate is very high in elevation. It was very cold. It was kind of sleeting that morning. And so beautifully, like right as we were meant to go into the river, the sun came out for, I think, all of 30 minutes that day, right as we go into the water. But it was absolutely the coldest water I have ever been in. So that was definitely signaling to me, okay, so that was my house of cold. Well, where am I learning about all of this story? Lake Atelan, Guatemala. For those who aren't familiar, Lake Atelan is a beautiful lake. I think it's the cauldron of a volcano, but it's surrounded by 7 different volcanoes, one of which, El Fuego, has been erupting daily since I've been here. So the fire energy here is very strong. Just like a lot of places on the planet, Sedona, Mount Shasta, Sacred Valley, Egypt. I've also been to Gunung Padang in Indonesia. It's super powerful. Bali is super powerful in its own right. There's a lot of energy. And so it turns out when you go to these types of places, oftentimes the energy can be so strong, it will manifest in a form of a physical clearing in the body. And my experience here has been no different. So not only do I have a ring of fire around the lake with the volcano energy, but also within my physical body, I've been clearing, a burning sensation in my stomach from pylori, which can be common bacteria to get as you're traveling in other countries, and also a UTI, which comes with the burning sensation. So I'm experiencing the burning throughout my being, and I'm reading this, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, what is the 5th house, And that's when I paused. I was like, I don't want AI to tell me, because AI kind of also knows me, so I didn't know how much they're just telling me this story to match who I am versus, what's actually happening. And come to find out, once I read the story, the 5th house leads me to the house of jaguars. So there's 5 jaguars in the story, and as the boys are going to the house, they know there's got to be some kind of trick inside the house, and they want to be prepared. So Honopu decides he's going to go and take a piss, and when he goes to take a piss, he's like pretending, right, that he needed to go. He finds this, like, a bunch of bones in the forest, and so he decides, I'm going to take these bones because you never know, I might need them. And so he brings the bones to the house, not knowing that they're going to enter the house of the jaguars. And turns out that he does a magic spell on the bones so that they're everlasting. And he gives them to the jaguars to keep them busy all night so that they don't attack the boys. And then in the morning, once the jaguars are satisfied, he basically tells them to go off in the land. They're no longer the servants of the lords. And so turns out Since I've been here at Lake Athlon, there's an organization called Anawa, which is an organization that works with indigenous tribes from North, Central, and South America to support preserving the culture, preserving the wisdom, supporting the tribes with regenerative practices, ways of bringing in income. And so they had coordinated a trip to go to Tikal Pyramid for the solstice. And not just Tikal, in the region of the Tikal Pyramid, which is the most well-known in the region, it's where most of the tourists go, there's many different Mayan ancient sites. One of which, I'm not even going to be able to pronounce the temple, so I'm not going to try, but it's specifically built for the solstice. So just like many ancient sites all over the world, there's certain astrological alignments for very good reason. And this particular site that we'll be at on the solstice is specific to the solstice. So to be able to be in ceremony with Mayan elders on the solstice, on this land, it's very, very special opportunity. And I didn't know any of this at the time, but as I'm then looking into the Tikal Pyramid, it turns out they call it the Pyramid of the Jaguar. And like, I'm just so amused all the time. You can't make this shit up. I'm literally living it. So to be continued on the story of the House of the Jaguar. But of course, I'm reading till the end of this story because I'm already, when you get into a story, it's really good and you don't want to put it down. So the sixth house is the house of the deadly bats. So the boys have to survive the night in the house with the deadly bats, and they decide to use their magic powers to put themselves in their blowguns. Like a blowgun where you like shoot a dart out. And so all night they're hiding in these blowguns so that the bats can't get them. And come dawn, or just before sunrise, it gets really quiet. And so the boys think, well, maybe they're gone. And Hanapu gets curious. And so he decides he's going to go take a look. And so he gets out of his blowgun, and one of the deadly bats was hiding, waiting for him, knowing that he could trick him. Comes down, swoops down, and eats his head off. So Hanapu has, at this point in the story, ceased to exist. And the other brother, he gets really kind of nervous and scared, and he's like, what's going on? I'm not going to pronounce it right probably, but I think it's something like Chibonke. And so he comes out of his blowgun and finds his brother headless on the floor. And he's thinking, oh no, what am I going to do? In between all of these houses, they're playing the ball game and they're winning. They're getting a tie. So they're kind of tied. They have one more game to go. And he's like, he knows he can't play this game without one other person. So he ends up using his magic to fashion a head onto the body of his brother to fool the lords that he does have someone that can play with him. And they end up winning the game. And this, of course, really pisses off the lords because they're just so aggravated at this point, thinking, how are we going to get rid of these boys? So they decide they're going to fashion this celebration. And with the celebration, it's tradition to jump over this fire. And the boys knew this was also part of the trick, and that as soon as they tried to jump in over the fire, they were going to push them in to kill them. And so because they won the game, the other brother comes back to life. It's a very magical story. I'm probably not doing that part justice too well, but bear with me here. The brothers decide, they fashion their own plan. They're going to be the ones that willingly jump to their death so that the lords aren't the ones that kill them. So through sacrificing themselves in choosing their death, they were able to utilize more magic in the story to get one of the Lord's servants to, or kind of more like a magician, to convince the lords that they should grind the bones into an ash and dump them into the river. And from that experience, the boys were able to rebirth themselves as manfish, mermans, if you will, and come back to life, go into this village, dressed as beggars, disguised not as the twins, do some magic as magicians to, allow them to stay and get some food and shelter. And turns out they tell the lords, we have these magicians and they're incredible. They have the most amazing song and dance. They're able to actually, they burned a house and then they brought it back just like in a flash, like as if nothing had happened, except the house was even better than before. They had sacrificed one of the animals and brought the animal back to life. And so the lords were curious, and they had a little suspicion, but they wanted to know for themselves. So they say, bring the magicians here. We want to see their magic. Long story short, the boys end up convincing the lords that they should sacrifice them so that they could then do their magic to bring them back to life, which of course they don't. They sacrifice them and they're like, ha ha ha, we've won the game. And basically from that point, the boys could have gone in two directions. They could have said, they could have killed all of the underworld, but instead they chose to say, here's the deal. Now that we have proven to you, that we have this great power, and that we could, overcome anything, you are no longer allowed to mess with the people of the upper world. You can only work within your own community here in the underworld, and to which all of the people had to agree. So rather than, saying, we don't want the underworld, it shouldn't exist, the twins recognized that there was a balance that was needed and created, having the dark and the light. And so that's kind of the culmination of the story. I don't know where the House of Bats is going to show up for me in this story, if at all. I did end up drawing another Isis card last week, which was the Osiris card, proper burial for freedom. So perhaps I need to willingly die again in the coming weeks or months in order to willingly resurrect again. I've said many times in my life, I feel like a cat butterfly. Like I've got 9 different, transformations into the butterfly, but I've way succeeded 9 at this point. So that is the rendition of the Hero Twins and how it parallels with my life, and a little, update of some of the magic that I have been up to as of late. And I'm just so delighted in the ways that the universe plays with me in these ways. And hopefully you feel a little bit of that delight too. So yeah, like I said, next stage of my journey later this week, I'm going to make my way up to the Tikal region. It's about a 12-hour bus ride or a 45-minute flight. So I will be taking the 45-minute flight. And from there, once the trip with the group is complete, I'm going to spend a couple extra days at Tikal near the new moon. I'm told there's a possibility I might be able to work my way in past dark. So we'll see if that is the magic that wishes to align for me there. And then from there, I'm going to drive over the border to Belize, because there's a couple other ancient Mayan sites, before I make my way back up to the United States for a couple of months so that I can go to my favorite place on earth, Burning Man, and celebrate life and celebrate my journey. Many people that go to Burning Man kind of recognize the closing of their year at the end of the burn, and once the temple has burned, then it starts anew. So for me, it's really an opportunity to celebrate, to unplug, and to unwind. And this year is really exciting for me. I'm going to be joining a new camp that is very focused on conscious relating, and bringing a lot more intention and ritual and ceremony into the burn. So that is going to be part of my intention as well. I'm looking forward to that. And I also had a little sneak preview, or a little teaser, I should say, for those of y'all that are in my Signal group, about the upcoming offering that I'm excited to announce. So y'all get to hear it exclusively here first. And for those of y'all watching the replay, maybe weeks or months down the road, definitely tune in to my Instagram at Transformational Shifts. You can email me, Maria at Transformational Shifts, or go to my website, transformationalshifts.com, to see what kind of offerings I have going. But I will be launching in July a 6-week program to embody your voice. And this is all about embodying your soul's vocal resonance. So each week we're going to play and experiment with sound, opening the voice, finding your soul note, and practicing awareness within the body. So really quite similar to what I was inviting you to feel into after the transmission that I shared. Allowing ourselves to really recognize, what is the body saying, how is it communicating to us, and how can I make sound that feels good in the body. And all of this is to support opening of the throat chakra. And so for those of you who may have had experiences in your life where you felt like you couldn't find the right words when you wanted to say something, maybe you didn't say anything at all because you were scared you weren't going to say the right thing, or maybe you felt like, what's the point? Like, people don't understand me. If you shrink, or the opposite, over-explain, I talk too much, or I really feel like I need to get my point across and I'm not getting it across. All of these things are related to the throat chakra. And so by playing with sound and allowing ourselves to get through whatever mental stories we have that might be keeping us from exploring sound, is the same thing when it comes to communication. Okay, so for those who perhaps wish they could, really speak clearly when they want to share their intentions, or who have a vision that want to be able to transmit it from the heart. All of these things we're going to explore in this 6-week program. So it'll be 6 weeks of group sessions, and as well as 2 one-on-one sessions with me, where we can utilize the soul integrative process that I've been talking about a little bit on this call, to really go into where is the resistance in the body, what are the limiting beliefs that have me thinking that I don't have the confidence to speak up the way that I wish. And at the end of the 6-week program, my intention for all of you is, well, one, to amplify your intention, but truly to feel more comfortable and confident with your voice, to allow the sound to move through your body, to really feel what it feels like to embody your soul note, similar to what you might have felt if you tone Om or tone at all. This is going to take this to the next level and allow us to move any stagnant or shift any stagnant energy in the body with sound. And so this will really give you the ability to express what you feel you want to express, knowing that you can tap into the heart, feeling into the body, and allow that to express and speak with you. And so I'm really looking forward to this. And for everyone that has donated to this opening series, I have a little special gift that I'll be sending you. So keep an eye out for that in the coming days. And I will be launching an intro to this program on July 2nd. So I'll be sharing more information about that in my Signal group. So be sure to jump in there. If you're not in there, I have really enjoyed sharing this transmission with y'all today. I hope you had as fun as I have living it. And I look forward to next month's transmission, Living Transmissions, every second Saturday of the month, where I'll be sharing more about the House of Jaguars and what Tikal and the Mayan lands and the Mayan cosmology that I'm starting to tap into has to teach me, so that I may then share it with you as well. So I want to give a big prop thanks to these hero twins. Thank you for the Scorpions for bringing me this opportunity, for inspiring me to share. I hope it has landed with you in all the ways that feel delicious and good as it does in my body to share. And so thank you for tuning in. And until next time, have fun living into that intention that you so beautifully brought forth earlier in the call. Much love, everyone. Thank you.